kind of Wesley's view and a few other things. I think he's just trying to make an argument for it, like a theology. So most books are like that, where you have the certain individual writing on end times, and he just wants you to believe in that, and he's going to draw up his picture of it, and he's going to give you all the scriptures and so forth. And that's kind of what you get in all these men. But this one is different, and it's such a valuable book. And I try to tell you guys that, like, I think it was the first year I had read it and studied it was probably somewhere in like 2011, 2013, somewhere in there. And so that book has a value in it because it traces historical premillennialism, and it starts in the early church. So he'll start with the church fathers. Really, they believe that it was in the Jewish writings too. So he makes a lot of strong points like that. Like, and it's argument, it's argumentation. It's not. This is just a study, and it's going to bore you. He's obviously got a lot of people who think one way, and he's thinking one way, and he wants them to all see his perspective, and he's kind of doing it from a defensive mode. So, so a typical page, it'll have a lot of his writing on it, right? Paragraph after paragraph, and then at the bottom, he's footnoting things, and that's what's so different for that era, because people weren't doing that a lot. You didn't have a lot. I mean, they quote people, and they might just put their name after the quote in the writing, but they would not, source. Okay, and so that he does sets him apart. Because it's really an early book to be doing that. All right, so Jesse Silver, he wrote this like 1914, something like that. All right, and the people he's using have to be before that. So a lot of these articles that he's quoting from in the footnotes are like 1911. They're around that era. See what I mean? So to him, it's current, and it's not something that's just faded in the background. But what I want you to see, and I've been on a kick, one of those nerd kicks for, days. I mean, I haven't, it was funny because this is probably too much information, but if you know anything about me recently, obviously I like to sing. And so, a lot of times I'm testing out the acoustics in the bathroom, you know what I'm saying? Because that's like one of the stronger places. If it was a hotel, it'd be a pool area. I used to do it in the pool area. And I couldn't tell if anybody could hear it because it does carry. Like, you don't think the sound carries like that. So I've been known to spend, little times in the bathroom, but hours, in different hallways or different things, just testing it out, seeing if I like it, because it is weird how much stronger, just acoustics can be than like systems. Okay, so like I was in, I think I told you guys about that one when we stopped up. Where was that? Where's the place Mom likes to go for the Christmas stuff? Frankenmuth. Yeah, I parked up in there, and it was really hot that day. It was like really sweaty hot, and have you guys been in hotels enough that some of them have air conditioning in the stairwells, but most of them do not. So the elevators and the stairwells are hot, double hot compared to the rest of the hotel. And so I'm sitting in there, so it's torturous. You know what I mean? But as I'm walking up the stairwell, I mean, you get that, it's just every little noise you make is just coming right back at you, like you're in a cave or something. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to sit down. And if you know anything else about me, I have allergies. I have allergy-induced asthma, So it's funny when I try to sing a song, like the one I rewrote, I don't know if you guys know that, but I was here one day during, I think it was Yaya's Kitchen. It was either at the very beginning of Yaya's Kitchen or it was Deborah's Pantry. I don't know which one. And so we had Aaron here, and we had Brad. Brad likes a few of these songs. He just doesn't let you know. Well, there's this one song by a secular group named Demons, okay? And I was trying to figure out, and I asked Aaron about it and stuff, and Aaron had heard about this group, and the guy isn't a Christian, okay? But and I've talked to you guys a little bit about him. I mentioned to you that he is trying to help people with depression and stuff like that. And so it's kind of like a secular self-help song. It's not really, do you get what I mean? And I could kind of tell it had a good intent. I could tell he was trying to help people. But he's basically saying, it's all about him, his struggle. But he's reaching out to other people who might have the similar thing. But he's saying, don't get too close to him personally because you're going to see that dark side and so forth. But, I ended up rewriting the song because it was so easy, because it's basically like a hell song. If you really listen to the words, it sounds like hell. He even he says, I'm hell bound. And so I said, I turned the words, and so I was able to make the whole thing into a Christian song. And at first it was kind of a joke. Like, I was in here with these guys, And I just like the tone the guy sings in so much that I was like, this needs to be recouped and it needs to be put into a way that, Christians could hear it. And so we were doing that, and Aaron helped me with the last line. So I have this funny line on the end where it's like, I was like, Aaron, I can't figure out how to, how the worms never die in hell. I was like, how do you put that in that song? And he goes, and the worms never fall. And it fits into that phrase. So you get what I mean? So Aaron helped me with that, and then Brad helped me with some of the other lines. Like he read through the whole thing as I was going. But like I said, it was just a joke. I was basically just thinking, oh well, I just don't want to sing the secular version, but I like this song and I want to change it to a Christian song. So we were in here singing it, and it did sound kind of cool and stuff. But what I think is going on with some of the interpretations today of end times, you'd be shocked. Like when you're going through Christian music, you're being indoctrinated. Do you see what I'm saying? When I was reading that 2023 book by Hummel, I don't know if you guys remember him as an author, but he was talking about how pervasive at one time, during the Jesus movement revival, mainly in America. So he was saying, how many years ago was that now? I think he was saying about 40 years ago, something like that, 50 years ago. So he was saying it was like a revival movement, and it was kind of the last time America saw a revival. Well, so if you're writing from a scholarly standpoint, you want to talk to people about end times, and you want them to you want to see if which one's winning out. So these books are kind of like arm wrestling contests. You know what I mean? You have one author in one position or an audience in another position, whatever it is, and they're always trying to get you on their side. Okay. And so he's tracing songs, he's tracing post-millennial songs today in current music, and there are, so you might not know it. You might not know that you're sitting down, you're listening to what you call a praise worship song, and it has false theology. It's teaching you, the gospel here is going to win out and it's going to change everything, and you don't need Christ to come and intervene. Okay. And so you got to be aware of that. And I think that's kind of going on across the board. Well, anyways, so in this book, he has sources that he uses. And, one of them, like I said, is about 1911. Well, what it does is he's showing you in these early books, but they're current to his time, that there was no question that Wesley's mentor on end times was premillennial. Okay, and so what he'll do on the footnotes is he'll say like this, he'll say pre. People have all these abbreviations. This author is a abbreviation author, okay? So he says, nobody argues, okay? So I have this over and over again in our study for Sunday School this morning. He says, this is Jesse Silver, and he says on page 150, he says, he quotes about 4 sources, which have been my heading for this whole morning. And then he says that Bengal was pre has never been disputed. Do you hear me? So that's a really important phrase to have. So if you guys, so I'm trying to get Collins to pay attention to me. I don't know if he is. Okay. This professor at Asbury, he's listening to me when I was kind of praising his teaching. He was listening to me when I was saying I like how we have some points that we agree on. But when I mentioned that I wanted to talk to him about end times, I started getting in the premillennial view. Okay. When I started talking about that, and I tried to say that Wesley was there. Sorry, premillennial view. When I did that, he started saying, I'm not interested, okay? And I didn't know what he meant by it. When he first wrote me, I thought he meant like, I'm not interested in the point, because what I was trying to say is, if you guys know, this is kind of a historical timeline. There's a man named, let's just call him John, because he's from Germany, so it's Johann, but John Bengal, and he was before Wesley, and then Wesley used him to write his end times notes. What everybody uses is the New Testament notes, okay? And that's where they get their understanding from. And I haven't tackled to date the biggest problem, okay, with trying to defend our side of the arm wrestling match, okay? I've taken some shots at it, but right now, probably the best I could do is just, I'll tell you before we're done, okay? But I'm trying to show you kind of a logical argument that I'm using to him to try to show what's going on, all right? And so we know Wesley used for his New Testament notes, John Bengal. Now, he also used some smaller authors, and one author said there's 3 of them mainly, and he tried to say all of them are in the post-millennial view, okay? So if you go to Wesley Scholars Today, remember that word, they're going to tell you that Wesley was in the wrong view. And they're going to tell you that with great assurance, all right? And so they're going to say he was a post-millennialist, which if you have heard anything about end times, it basically means the second coming will happen after a revival. So everything's going to get better, and then Christ is going to come back to an already corrected earth where everything's great. And guys, if you've lived here at all, if you're of age, you'll know that this world is not heaven. It's not heavenly. It doesn't look like I mean, first of all, I just told you just 5 minutes ago when you were walking in, I told you that one of our experts of our day says we haven't seen in America a genuine revival, an outpouring revival at a mega level for 40 to 50 years. Do you see what I mean? So how can we have some post-millennial view? But today I'm telling you, there's a lot of scholarship that's going in that direction. So in order to do that, you have to read the book of Revelation and the book of Daniel in the Bible figuratively, okay? And so that's what they're saying. They're saying Wesley believed that way. Now, guys, when you go through his whole study, Jesse Silver's study, and that's what we're talking about today, you'll see that he summarizes what some teachings of postmillennialism are. And one that he teaches is he says that they believe in kind of a heavenly escape, all right, where during the tribulation period, the martyrs and saints are in heaven, okay? And you could see, so that would be a smaller point I've never brought up to you guys. And if you look at Wesley's study on the New Testament notes, he seems to suggest that. Do you see what I mean? He does seem to say that you remember, if he does embrace Bengel's two millennial theory, which most people don't think, but if he did, he thinks one's going to be in heaven, one's going to be on earth. The one in heaven, they follow one after the other. The one in heaven would be the one that postmillennialists read him to be suggesting, okay? And so if you're a post-millennialist, in other words, if you're in the wrong view, when you listen to Revelation chapter 20, verses 1 to 11, you don't believe that it's talking about a literal millennium here on earth. You give lip service to it, but what you think it means is that it's a revival, okay? And so if you actually take their study a little further, they'll tell you that it's the born-again experience. So if you read A.M. Hills, who's a postmillennialist, he'll say, when you get born again, you've had the first resurrection take place in your life. See how he's not taking it literally, he's taking it figuratively, okay? And so a second thing is that, these are key points on the postmillennial view. They believe that you don't have a literal, so it'd be figurative, it'd be a figurative resurrection. Okay? And so is there any ground for that with Wesley? No. All right, see what I mean? This is kind of the fun that I would have with Collins if he would actually talk with me. Because I'd show him that there's certain things, you could find certain things. I'd have to say, yes, this is there in Wesley's teaching. He does, if he's following Bengel that far, which I don't know if he is. All right? The West, an author that was earlier on named West, his last name, Nathaniel West, he said no. He said Wesley never followed Bengel in his two millennial theory, okay? And I think there's ground for that, because when Wesley was pressed, and Bengel got so into his view that it was popular in his time, and sometimes it still is today. Do you guys remember in 2012? That's probably the last time somebody made a date trying to say there's something about the end times coming. Do you remember when they were doing that? It was kind of recent, in like 2012. Some people guessed. Before that, it'd probably be Y2K. But people are always trying to set dates. Okay, and Bengel, who's the author we're talking about, he tried to set a date, and he thought, now if you're in the post-millennial view, you'll only admit that he was saying that there is going to be a millennium, which would be a revival. Remember, it's figurative in their view, starting in 1836. All right, that doesn't make any sense. Does that line up with Wesley? Okay, so that's what I'm doing. That's all I'm trying to show you guys. Okay, this is how simple it is for my mind. This is why it's so troubling to me that the scholarship is where they are, because today they are here. This is where they would say Wesley was, and they're saying because of Bengel. And I'm saying no, okay? Because so far, the only one of these main points of their view, there's only one that lines up. Okay. The second one, 1836, does Wesley believe that revival will start after him? Remember, he died in 1791. No. Because the current belief of postmillennialism is that Wesley had to believe he was in the latter day outpouring. So have you guys ever heard of like Latter Day Saints? Okay, or you've heard of, you see, that's the phrase, the only phrase we have anymore that relates to it. But really, if you go into secular studies, this is how pervasive end times is in secular studies. They all believe there was going to be a, that's where you get all those strange Greek lore theories like Thor and so forth, where you're going to have some better period where mankind comes to this astute, beautiful, strong, do you get what I'm saying, peak of their existence, and it's going to be this amazing period. Most people, if you're outside of our view, you don't think it's a literal 1,000 years. You think it's just a figurative statement that could go on for a long time, okay? But if you know Wesley and John Fletcher, who was his underling, he wanted to say was after him, he was going to lead after him. If you want to say they're both postmillennialist, do you see what I mean? This is the problem for you. They are saying that the revival started in their lifetime. You can't have it both ways. This point goes against their view. So you have something like this going on. If you're going to hold on that he is in a revival and he sees himself in it, you can't say it's going to come in 1836. Do you see what I'm saying? So again, no. We can go down the list of all the important things in their view, and I can show you why it doesn't line up with Wesley. Okay, another one that is clear. Okay, is in this one. This is probably the hardest point, and this is the one that they're building their whole kingdom on. All right, so we'll put this with an asterisk in a way. Okay, and it is that Wesley says, he has one line in Revelation chapter 20 in the New Testament notes, where he says, "Then will be the second coming, the judgment." This is all the phrase says. And I'm not going to go there entirely today. I'm not going to kill this whole argument yet, okay? But he says the second coming, the judgment, and eternity future. See what I'm saying? So because of that one phrase in the New Testament notes, they want to argue that he was saying after both millenniums. Remember, if he followed Bengal to the ultimate picture, Bengal believed there was going to be an earthly reign of Christ on this earth, and then also one in heaven that followed it. And their main argument, this is their main argument, guys, is that he says that line and says after both millenniums, which would be post-millennial. He says there's going to be a second coming. So here we go again, guys. This is what's funny. The whole current scholarship rests. Do you hear me? This is how important this argument is. Rests on the thought of one line. Do you hear me? One line in his New Testament notes. So their whole interpretation, he has, guys, there's over 1,000 pages in the New Testament notes. He has 3 volumes of Old Testament notes. Just to start rocking this argument a bit, okay, this is where they stand. The current author, that he has a 4-volume series. They're all read. They're printed the same way through the United Methodist Church. One of them is a Wesleyan eschatological reader. It's Mark K. Olson. Mark K. Olson is very loud online. He's a professor at one of the other universities, and he's arguing because of this argument, and he's trying to pretend he came up with it, and I found where he came from. Do you hear me? He's been trying to pretend for about 8 or 9 or 10 years that he came up with it, and I found it existed since the Methodist Church went liberal in the 1800s. One of the authors that we're going to be looking at today argued this before he did. Okay, so first of all, it's not his argument. And it only came up years and years later, okay? So I'm trying to show you that this stuff doesn't line up. I can rock this because in order for this to be true, they're already admitting, scholarship then and now is in total agreement that Charles Wesley, Wesley's brother, is a premillennialist. If you know anything about the Wesley brothers, they are not in disagreement. Wesley and John would write every day. They lived almost the exact time frame of each other. His younger brother died before he did, but they were just 5 years apart. Do you see what I'm saying? And they lived their whole entire lives connected with each other. And every book that ever came out, Fletcher's books, Wesley's books, all went through both their reading. Okay? To sit here and teach that Charles Wesley is teaching against his brother is insane. Do you hear me? But they are all admitting, old scholarship and new, that Charles Wesley is a premillenarian on end times. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't see you. He sure did. Yeah, wrong, false teachings. Yes, he did. He did. They were like their own editorial house, these two brothers. They were they were perfect editors. Do you see what I'm saying? Wesley had a gift of my daughter's a speed reader, but Wesley could take voluminous writings and take them down to size and make them publishable for poor people so they could read them. You know what I mean? And so he was really good. He had covered so much material. Like, it's unbelievable. They didn't have TV. They didn't have cell phones. They didn't have videos. Do you see what I mean? They were constantly reading. And so that was what your life was. And as a result of that, they had a lot of discovery that we don't have today so much, okay? But what I'm trying to show you is it's insane. Okay, so again, this doesn't line up. Charles Wesley is clearly pre. There's no way you can argue. The worst scholarship today on him will tell you he was only early premillennial or to middle. We're missing most of Charles Wesley's diary. We don't have the rest of it. Do you see what I mean? So you can't make an argument from silence. This is their arguments. Okay? I'm just showing you how weak it all is. All right? So Charles is clearly pre, and yet they want to say John is not. All right, which is ridiculous. All right? And so here's another thing that I bring against their mega point here, which is that after both millenniums, let's just put it that way. Christ is supposed to come back after both millenniums. That's what they think that line means. Okay. Another thing that stands is you got to remember that he wrote this New Testament notes, which is the only thing they're looking at, in 1755. They say the greatest error when they're faulting American holiness people and everybody else who's ever made an argument from Wesley is that you're not considering the whole Wesley. Okay. And they'll know that the Old Testament notes, which they all neglect, and that's why I'm spending my entire 2 years reading his Old Testament notes. Do you see what I'm saying? Is because I'm not going to do that. This came 10 years later, so he's supposed to have, guys, if you embraced Bengel's view, and if Bengel was a post-millennialist, then you'd be affirming your teaching 10 years later. You'd be deeper into it. Do you hear me? You'd be solidly arguing for your belief, not coming against yourself. Do you know that the majority of the statements we have about Jesus reigning on this earth come from the Old Testament notes? Hello? He doesn't say anything at all in the Old Testament notes about a double millennium. Wesley never says anything about it. Do you hear me? But he parks out many times. Isaiah, if you read the Isaiah notes, I posted these online, but he argues again and again for Christ reigning on this earth and that he has to come here first to do so. Okay, so 10 years later, we have him talking about a premillennial view, which contradicts this whole point. I think that one alone silences that argument. The best I can do with that statement, guys, is I think that it's just a summary statement that they're taking out of context. Do you hear that, Lee? If they ever try to push that at you, because it's a one-line argument, it's very easy for somebody to take from somebody else and push it. If they ever use that argument, my argument back would be to say that all he's doing is summarily stating that there's going to be a second coming and a judgment and so forth, and it has nothing to do with his general chronology that he's put in the book for you so you can see it all. Do you see what I mean? Guys, the fun of it is I've done this for you on Facebook, and I think I did it for you here online in one of my teachings. I'm going to find all this. I'm putting it all together, okay? But I want to show you guys that I've already taught you how I read Wesley's New Testament notes, and to me it's self-evident. He is teaching a premillennial view if you read the whole New Testament notes. It's right there like a kid can understand it. Do you see what I'm saying? So that one line doesn't mean anything to me. I think they're taking it out of context and they're misunderstanding it. Yes. Yeah. Okay. And these things are found on charts and certain things, but you can do it. The best way is they usually put it on a chart like this. So they'll draw it out. Let's say this is the chronology of time. We're all believing that Christ is going to come back. Okay, and so let's put that on both charts. That we believe Christ is going to come back. Okay, And so this would be the second coming of Christ. He came the first time as a baby, and he died for our sins, okay? The second coming is when he comes here as the lion, not the lamb, and he takes, that's the whole point of it. He takes this earth for himself. It's going to be his kingdom here on earth, okay? So in the premillennial view, that's what we think. We believe the second coming happens before the 1,000 years. So 1,000 years of him reigning here on this earth, and it's literal, yeah. Oh, yeah. There you go. All right. But the false teaching, which is a recent argument, even the theologian who made it up, his name is Daniel Whitby, and this is postmillennialism. Its view, obviously, is that the second coming happens after the millennial reign, after the 1,000 years. Okay. So it's just inverted. That's the difference. We believe that Christ comes back and he sets up his kingdom. He fixes everything. We believe everything is going to go on a downward trend until he gets here. Generally speaking, things are getting worse. That's what we believe. Yeah. Yeah. That's fine. All right, so this looks really involved because my wife filled out all the gaps, but you don't need all of this. The one part you need is these three things up top: rapture, second coming, and then the great white throne. So we believe that if you're holy, if you're right with God, 100%, as Yaya's taught you at Yaya's Kitchen, then you can go in the rapture and you'll escape judgment. This is 7 years of judgment. So it's a lot like the Bible compares it to Noah's flood, so it's bad. You don't want to be here during that. And that's chapter 6 to 18 and 19, actually 19 of Revelation. It tells you all the judgments that she's talking about here. Then, so we've gone up with Christ. We're in heaven, missing what's going on here on earth in a rapture experience. We don't have to go through the bad stuff. And then when he returns, which is the second coming that we were talking about, when he returns, we come back with him and he sets up a reign here on earth. He takes care of the enemy, which is the Antichrist. He's the man of sin, the Bible calls him. He's the revealed prophetic character who will try to usurp God's authority here on earth. He tries to set up his own kingdom. And so he's going to be a human being that arises during this that's, full of the devil. So God takes care of him, at Armageddon, Jesus does it. And then he sets up his reign here on earth. And this is what we're talking about, the 1,000-year reign. And then Satan's loose for a short period of time, and he corrupts the world again. He's been bound that whole time, so he does a quick backsliding of the whole world. And as a result, they come against God and his people in Jerusalem, and then God wipes them out, and we go to the great white throne. So in other words, that's the end of this earth. It's by fire, and then there will be, there'll be heaven to deal with. God will either, if you're a holy person, he'll let you go to heaven. If you're an unholy person, you'll go to hell, okay? And so that's the biblical timeline that we're teaching, okay? But right here, the key point is the second part of it. We're talking about when does the second coming happen? And they're trying to tell us that the person who founded our denomination, long shot, our grandpa to our denomination is John Wesley. They're trying to say he's in the wrong view. They're trying to say he's in this view. And I'm trying to show you that's not possible. And I went through all those reasons just a minute ago why they don't line up with their biggest arguments, okay? But now, I want to show you why I've been doing this study and what helps us more today, okay? This is unique, and we haven't gone through this. Jesse Silver has notes at the bottom of his page 150 where he's trying to argue, and this is what's so cool, and I found this guy help me more than once, all right? He has such a library, and I don't even know, sometimes you can get a lot of biographical material on these older individuals. He wrote, he lived about 1800, something in the middle to late 1800s to, very, like the first 2 decades of 1900s, okay? It was not typical in that era to source your books. That's a new thing. If I'm a bookseller, okay, on the side when I'm not doing ministry, and I know that I can't even sell the book if it doesn't have a copyright date, and it won't till 1970. Copyrights weren't made up till 1970? Do you see what I'm saying? Nobody sourced books. You weren't going to be called a plagiarizer. Do you see what I'm saying? You weren't going to get any trouble back then, so nobody did. They just would, oh, here, this is a good quote, and they might put your name on it. Benjamin Pettit said it. In what book? Where? When? Okay. Well, it's so unusual that Jesse F. Silver, this guy on End Times, a Methodist in the yeah, it wasn't United Methodist Church. United Methodist Church is a current existence. We're talking about the Methodist Episcopal Church, which was, more of a holy church here in America. But anyway, he does footnote, okay? And he tells you right where he gets it. And I told you guys that I've been on this kick. I get on Wikipedia, I look up Bengal, and it told me the whole story. So I want to remind you of these things too. Remember, this is all going to come together, okay? But if you just look up Wikipedia and you look up Bengal, it'll tell you this crazy story that you can't possibly believe he's a postmillennialist, okay? Because postmillennialists are not literal. So if you're reading them, you're supposed to kind of fall asleep. I had a writer, if you guys remember, 10 years ago, I made a PowerPoint, and I can't use my PowerPoints anymore because we've gone to Mac, and so all my PowerPoints are all messed up, okay? But on the PowerPoint, I had a Post-it sticker that said, oh, Christ is coming back, but don't worry about it. It's going to be 1,000 years. We'll see him in 1,000 years. Do you see the fun? That was one author making fun of the idea. Okay, so in other words, you can't be an imminency arguer. You can't be a person who's saying Christ is going to come back. You can't read the New Testament like it reads. When the last words are, even so, Lord, come. Do you see what I'm saying? I'm coming soon. He doesn't say the millennium's coming soon. He doesn't say revival's coming. It does, Book of Revelation doesn't. My buddy was in prison. He got saved reading the Book of Revelation. You don't get saved because you're enjoying reading the Book of Revelation. You get scared to death. That's what happened to him. He's in prison. He reads Revelation. He gets scared to death. That's the design of Revelation. So when these teachers and preachers today, and I can name them in our denomination, are going around telling everybody, it's a day of grace, and this book was written to comfort you. No, it wasn't. It was written to scare you to death. Okay, there's no more scary book in the Bible than the Book of Revelation. And guys, I'm trying to show you that Jesse F. Silver is so cool because along the way, he's setting you up to explode your thinking, okay? And so all along, he's doing that, all right? And so just to show you the genius of the guy in general, all right? When he argues that point, what we were just talking about, he doesn't just go there. If he brings up a group of people, so he's going through all church history. Are you guys familiar with that in a general outline? The first 300 years, the church was consistent. And all of them exclusively taught premillennialism. Do you hear me? And I've even quoted some of them this week for you on Facebook, if you look, where they are talking about pre-trib rapture. And he was already on that, Mom, way before your guy that you're reading today. Do you see what I'm saying? He had written this down. He had sourced it. And that's the genius of this guy. He is going through so much writing that it'll drive you insane, okay? And he's finding all this material for you, and he's trying to show you, and he's able to abbreviate it. He's able to bring it down so much that it's better than Josh McDowell. It's better than anybody today, where he's giving you these short little sentences, just getting to the point, and then he says, here's all the people, and he's even able to abbreviate sources and go boom, 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 and he's backing everything he's saying up, okay? And so one of the things that is popular today is they'll say, John Wesley believed this view, guys, that the first 300 years of the church was premillennial. Okay? They were. There's nothing you can do about that. So today, a Wesleyan so-called scholar in our church, he was like 92 years old or 93, if he's even alive, H. Ray Dunning. He wrote a book with Racer in our church, a man named Racer, and he said, and everybody likes it. When Collins gave me my source list, he put it on there. Okay, because he's in the wrong view. And so he said, but guys, they did their best arguing. They can't deal with it. So what they say, they cheat you. They say, well, the early church, the first 300 years, did not teach exactly what a pre-trib Darbian Calvinistic scholar would today about end times. It's not 100% the exact same thing. Do you hear me, Lee? Do you hear what they're doing? That's like when you're talking to a little kid and he's just punched his sister in the face and he tells you, she just fell down. Do you get what I'm saying? Yeah, but why with such ferocity? Why with such force did she fall down? And he won't tell you what, you see what I'm saying? He won't tell you the truth because he's caught. And that's what they're doing. That's what Dunning and Racer are doing. They're saying, it isn't the same thing. Guys, it is the exact same thing. Do you hear what I mean? And they were a uniform voice. And guys, what's crazy about him is he'll show you that, 325, they call it, sometimes in the old books, they call it the Council of Nice. It was anything but nice, okay? But the Council of Nicaea, that's what we call it. And 325, so 325 AD, they had a council where Constantine the Great, decided he was going to be a Christian. In Jesse F. Silver's book, he demonizes the man. When I stood in front of my grandpa said, Ben, that was the best time ever for the church because for the first 10 centuries of the church, there's persecution, from the Roman Catholics. Do you hear me? It was persecution from the church. They never tell you that. And guess what view the Roman Catholic Church had embraced and stomped out, which Jesse F. Silver gives you the whole story of. Okay, I showed you guys way back when we started that there's a creed that came before the Nicene Creed and the Apostles' Creed. Amanda grew up in a church, a Presbyterian, where she would have to stand up. We've only started doing this in this area a little bit, but she would stand up, or they would do it in the church service, and they had memorized the Apostles' Creed. Do you know that creed has been tampered with? The Roman Catholic Church, there is a creed, and we've already covered all this. I've already shown all this to you, where they took the real quote, and it had a line on the end of it that said, "We are premillennials," a whole entire church. And they took it off. The Roman Catholic Church did. Roman Catholic Church is amillennial, post-millennial. Do you see what I'm saying? They've never been in the right view. And that's due to a man named Dionysius. Started with Origen. Origen was one of the wackiest church fathers. Dionysius, stamped out. One author used eradicate. He eradicated the view. They punished people. Augustine was a major player in it. These are the ones who took it out of the church. When it was the first 3 centuries, it was the purest centuries of the church. It was the holiest centuries of the church. It was when holiness was the number one thing. These men stamped it out. And Augustine was the first one to embrace the whole idea with the Roman Catholic Church that we're the Catholic Church is the only church, and everybody outside is pagan, Christians including. So Lutherans and every other denomination there is on earth is not Christian. Only the Catholic Church is Christian. See what I mean? And Augustine was the first father who started that bitter persecution of people. Do you see what I'm saying? And that's where the church started doing that. So before that, they were Christian. We all come from the Roman Catholic Church. There's not a Christian here on earth, do you see what I'm saying, that didn't start in that fold. But, so when I talk about my history, I'm going to go to the Roman Catholics too. Because there's a period where they were the purest church. But when they started to have these church fathers that weren't right, Dionysius, Augustine, do you see what I mean? They started religiously persecuting anybody in our view. So did the end times view go out of the church entirely? No. He traces it for you. There's a group called the Montanists. They were mountain people that ran away and lived like monks in the mountains. Do you see what I'm saying? They had extremism in them. So some people say, oh, they're heretics. Yeah, by the Roman Catholic Church. Watch out who they call heretic. They called everybody who was trying to give you the scriptures heretics and burned them at the stake. Do you see what I'm saying? It depends on what period of time you're talking about. Denominations as a whole tend to backslide. This denomination we're in is backsliding right now. Okay, it doesn't mean that you throw out the baby with the bathwater. It doesn't mean they never were in the truth. You have to go to the periods when they were in the truth, okay? So what I'm trying to show you is he traces all that for you. That's where the book starts. You're going, why are we talking about this? Why does it matter that we're in the history? Do you see why it matters? And so guys, guess when the message came back? From being only with the Waldensians. If you ever heard Peter Lundel's teaching, he gave you a big group talk about them and how energetic they were for Christ and full of good works. These are all holiness people, but they were on the outskirts. What does that mean? That means they were in lands that weren't Roman Catholic. Do you see what I'm saying? Where it was enforced, church and state, after Constantine enforced Roman Catholicism and amillennialism on everybody, and you had to believe that way. Do you see what I mean? After Augustine. And so these groups were able to escape that, so it never disappeared. And they taught just like we do, and they preserved the ancient teaching. And so what's so smart about Silver is when he brings them up, he doesn't say, hey, they started, like not to be mean to Peter, but Peter would. He'd say, they started after 700. No, he'll say, their origin is ancient. And he'll show you how many church people throughout history will show that each of these groups, there's different groups and there's different names. Go way back to the early teaching of the church fathers. Do you see what I'm saying? When it was purest. So he's showing you that they preserved the teaching all along. And when did the teaching come back in the main view of the church? The Reformation. If you're not in our view, it's funny how they'll go, oh, there's wild people after that too. The French, prophets, you'll hear about them in the 1700s around Wesley's time. Wesley didn't condemn them. That's interesting. They're kind of like the charismatics of the 1700s. And do you see what I mean? Oh, these people will get, yeah, because they knew something was coming. Do you see what I mean? It demands action. When you believe in a true teaching on end times, you believe your whole life has to be lived in light of that, okay? And by the way, that's how Paul lived his life. He was telling you it's going to happen any moment. Guys, so one of my exciting moments this week was when I was listening to that song again. I was blending with it, singing it in my car. It's kind of fun because as a guy, I'm a guy, but you can't really tell when I sing because sometimes my song will go up high with the girls, but I don't go where the girls go. The girls are in one level higher than me, and it's uncomfortably. So I go down one level, but we blend a lot. You see what I mean? So I have some recording in the car where the girl's singing this, and she's singing too high. I noticed there was no women in the car singing. I was listening for them, but they weren't going with it. She's really up there, right? And I'm right below her, and I'm just kind of blending with her on this old song. It's a hymn. And I was curious about it this week, okay? Because it's always bugged me a little bit because there's a little bit of group in here with some tension about these end times teachings. And so when we sing that line, there's almost kind of this, like, I can feel it. You know what I mean? This tension. Because he says a line at the end of it. The hymn is... I know whom I have believed, we just spell it out, believed, and am persuaded that he is able to keep that which I've committed unto him against that day. You know how that goes. I know whom that song, okay? Well, when you get to the part I'm talking about, the verse, it says, and I know, the whole song is it's one of those songs like a Christian sometimes writes, where it's like, I don't know anything. I don't know anything. That's kind of how the song goes, every verse. I don't know how the Spirit moves. I don't know. See, I mean, he's basically saying, hands off of the sacred. I don't understand everything. That doesn't mean he doesn't believe in pre-trib, premillennialism. He was tied in with D.L. Moody, the author of that hymn. Do you see what I'm saying? Was D.L. Moody was his instructor and pushed him to be an evangelist, and he became almost as influential as D.L. Moody. Isn't that crazy? And so this man, believed in this. So he goes, I know not. In that verse I'm talking about, it talks about the second coming at the beginning of the verse. And it's like verse 4 or something like that. And then he goes, and I don't know if I will walk the veil with him. I didn't know what that phrase meant. Or meet him in the air. Do you see what I mean? And I was meeting him in the air, guys. This is the rapture. That's a phrase we're going to see. He's not coming back to this earth. That's the second coming. We're going to meet him in the air. 1 Thessalonians 4. That happens first. You don't want to be here during the tribulation period, which comes before the second coming. All right? So basically, postmillennialists have the exact same calendar. They just push it off. So they think that there's going to be a little backsliding. Everything's going to get positive. That's the difference. Postmillennialism basically means everything's going to get better and better because of a revival that happens first. Christ comes back to an already fixed earth. They do believe in a little time of backsliding. That little thing that Satan does at the end. And you'll notice this in certain teachers that are teaching here. They say this. And then, we just go into the eternity future, okay? After a great white throne that kind of corrects, and there's only one resurrection in their view. There's no rapture, okay? It's right before the great white throne. We all just get resurrected, okay? So that's their view, and it's wrong, all right? But you'll notice that we do believe that before the second coming, there's going to be trouble, all right? We think there's going to be the tribulation period. And the rapture is going to happen before that, okay, to get us out of here so we don't have to be a part of it. All right? They believe things are going to get bad right before we resurrect too. Do you see what I mean? But they just think it's way down the road and their calendar's messed up. So they're going to use the same passages we do. Do you see what I'm saying? And misunderstand it and misapply it, okay? But I'm trying to tell you that guy was a pre-trib, premillennialist. He was telling you, walking in the veil means I don't know if I'm going to die. It's the phrase from the scripture where it says, I know that I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. That's how we phrase it. It's the veil, okay? I don't know if I'll walk the veil with him. I don't know if I'll die first or if the rapture is going to happen. See, it's a fitting song. He's not contradicting himself. And so it's still a pre-trib, premillennialist. And I wanted to argue that because I want to show you guys how often we still get them in our hymn books, even though they try to take them out too, to this day. Do you see what I mean? By the way, Church Nazarene posted, as I was telling you guys a week ago, probably like 2015, 2016, a video of Ben Witherington III. You've heard his name, a scholar in our church, and he's arguing the rapture is throw out the baby with the bathwater in a 7-minute window. Let me have Adam. It'd be fun. Do you see what I mean? He puts no place for comments or anything else. It's not fair. You can't say, we are open to your views in our church and then smash out the only right view that we were born in. Okay? See what I mean? They're being unfair. All right, so anyway, so let's get to this a little bit more. So guys, this is how hard it is for me for Sunday school. I was up all night, if you can't tell. Okay? Over and over again. My brain won't shut off even when I'm shut off. All right? So I'm sleeping and I wake up with my head hurting because I don't know if I ever was asleep. That's how bad it is sometimes. All right. And so, but I get up and I start working on this all hours of the night. I'm trying to find 4 quotes that this man put at the base of a page for me, so I don't have to do all this homework always all by myself. And I definitely suggest doing this. He put this. Okay, so on his book, he puts, as a footnote, he says, nobody, and I've already quoted it to you, nobody's ever argued that Bengal was anything other than pre. No authority has ever argued that. Guys, that's insane. Because what I was starting to tell you about my professor Collins, that I'm trying to get to see this. He's a 70-year-old expert on Wesley. He's way higher in the ranks than I'll ever be. He has more influence than me, okay? I want him to hear this evidence. But he won't do it right now. He's frustrated, so he disconnected the conversation. Okay, but I'm going to send it to him anyway when I get it organized. You're going to get a little happy email. All right, but what I want, and I'm going to organize all this stuff. I have hundreds of pages already I've been working on for days, okay? But I'm going to bring it down. I'm going to put it together where he can't miss the point, all right? But what I want you to see is in these 4 things, he gives 4 sources from his day summarizing where Bengal was. So where would you guys go if you were in that day and books were your thing? Where would you go to find out general definitions? What do we do to this day? We have sets of dictionaries and we have sets of encyclopedias. Yeah, now you're saying Google. That's not that one there, okay? So he goes to encyclopedias. Guys, I found them. For the first half of the night, I couldn't. I was absolutely miserable. Middle hours of the night, I'm like, golly, he's got one post-millennialist, and the guy makes the argument for the dum-dums. He just didn't see it because he didn't read the whole book. He had just read the earlier quote, and he saw where he said, oh, he's a literalist. So he thought he was defending the right view. All right, so he puts him as one of his sources. So we got to X that one off the chart because in that very book, he makes the argument that the dum-dums make today, okay? All right, but look, all 3 of these, I found them. I got one of them sitting right in front of me right now. I came in here with it. Lee stopped me and started talking to me about when he was electrocuted. I asked him the night when the baby was born the other night, and he gave me the cool story, so I had to stop for that. How he was like completing a circuit and sitting there going, and he couldn't get off of it and tried to put his leg on there and just got one more attachment going. And he said he literally had his eyes rolled back in his head, and he couldn't see anything. Like usually you can see something in your head, but you couldn't see anything. He was that close to dying. And God just spared him. He basically said all he could do, he's conscious. So he said, God, help me. I can't get off of this fence. He had put a wire on it days before, forgot about it, and, completed the circuit on accident, and he couldn't get off, And so he found himself a few minutes later on the ground. I came from a naturalist point. I shouldn't have done that. I said, well, maybe you just fell because your weight, couldn't hold you entirely without using you to help. But once you lost your complete weight, he said, no, God took me off of there. You see what I mean? And I hadn't thought of that. I hadn't even thought of that. So that's cool. Okay. But you would stop for that story too, all right? But going back on this. So 2, 3, and 4, I found all of these sources. And guys, it took me all stinking night. It took me all night, but I told you, don't put me on this because I will find it, all right? I found them on websites. These are 1911 encyclopedias. All they have is scattered versions of them online. They don't have, I found them in complete order on a man's website. I was like, oh yeah. I went right to it. I looked up the exact page. I get the exact page, and here we go. Do you see what I'm saying? So guys, you got to hear this stuff, right? Revelation chapter 20, verse 1 to 10. Here it is alleged. This is our man, Silver, saying, this is where they go. This is where the false teachers go when they're trying to take Wesley out of his. He goes, is the proof that Wesley was a post-millenarian. He says, and yet Wesley translated and abridges from Bengal, the guy we're talking about, who has all authorities acknowledged. He says this in his extra book, was an ardent premillenarian. I told that to Collins. I said, guys, that would be a fair question to start with. If he's your whole pillar, can we please ask where he stood If Wesley is copying him, that will tell where Wesley stood. Okay? And he goes, that doesn't matter. All I care about is Wesley is a postmillenarian, and that's what I think. The end of the conversation. Well, to me, that's like, guys, dude, hello. I think this is a pretty important issue here, okay? And so under so this is under the heading in the first source that he puts, Doctrine in the 18th Century. He looks up millennium. Does that make sense? In the encyclopedia? And he finds this. It's called Schaff and Herzog, Encyclopedia of Religious Knowledge, edited by Samuel Macaulay. I found the exact volume 7, Funk and Wagnall's Company, New York and London, copyright 1910. All right. But the chiliastic doctrines, guys, chiliasm is the Greek word chilia. This is where we get millennium from. It's in Revelation 20, and it appears 6 times. Millennium is chiliasm. Okay, that's just a word they tagged on anybody who believed in our view. All right, you're a chiliast. They give us a whole bunch of other names, but we'll go with that one. All right, and so received their most powerful support from Johann Albert Bengel. Huh? The original encyclopedia, published to the whole world, is telling you that Bengel was a premillenarian. Guys, when I started my conversation with Collins, I started backwards, and I said, guy, I have a 19... I know exactly when he was quoting him. So I said, you got to know how scholarly this man was. Our best scholar, H. Horton Wiley, you can't beat him. He was great at sourcing, too. He wrote his sources between 1930 and 1940. Guys, this extends it even further into our time frame. That means till this period of time, so far, nobody questioned if Bengel was do you hear what I'm saying? A premillennialist. That goes a long way. He lived in 16, he was current with Wesley. So we're talking about 1700s. Do you see what I'm saying? So from 1700s to 1930 or 40, it wasn't questioned at all. That gives me a lot of trouble when people today are trying to sell you on one line that he's a postmillennialist. Hello? Yeah, that's crazy. All right? And so he's telling you right away, whose writings may be said to open the third period. He's telling you to open the whole period of study on premillennialism. Everybody, because he's a reformer. You see, I mean, he's later reformer like Wesley was, but he opened a whole new door. That's why they called him in the original paper I was talking to Collins about, the father of premillennialism. How could there be such contrary stories? He's a postmillennialist today, and they're calling him the father of premillennialism in his own time. Even Wikipedia tells you guys he was scaring people to death, and they moved their houses when they read his book because they were afraid they were too close to the papacy, and they thought he was the beast. Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, that tells on something. All right? I mean, everything I look at is screaming they're lying or they're distorting the reality. Okay? Here's the next one. He said, so that was in that book. Okay, Chambers, Encyclopedia and Dictionary, Useful Knowledge. All right, this is volume 10, page 199. Among the foremost chiliastic teachers of modern centuries are to be mentioned these guys. All right, and we'll skip on down underneath that same heading. Bengel arrived in earnest interest in the subject among so Bengel revived an earnest interest in the subject among Orthodox Protestants. Look where they put him. Guess where Wiley put him? Do you see what I'm saying? They're not putting him in postmillennialists. They're putting him in premillennialists. And our dude's going, it's not even contested. And he's showing you every source he can come up. He could have exhausted this guy the way he is. You should have seen what he did with all those church fathers. Do you know the other argument that Silver fed me about a year ago was when I was looking for Fletcher's view and which is Wesley's follow-up guy, and I was trying to find where Fletcher talked more about premillennialism, and he gave me the exact passages where you can't. I mean, you remember I did a whole waiting school PowerPoint teaching, showing you where he's going, hundreds of scriptural paragraphs. Here is the second coming. Here is the millennium. Here's the second coming. Here's the millennium. Here, they're trying to tell you he's postmillennialist. Are you kidding me? Do you see what I'm saying? When you read this together, you'll think you're insane to try to see this otherwise. Yeah. Yep. And just to spare that third guy, that guy was the one who wrote the original article that the other guy was plagiarizing. And it's right here in front of me. He's got the same article. It's following the exact same outline. That's why I knew where Bengal was going to appear in it, because it was in the other one. The other guy just shortened it. Do you see what I mean? He brought the article down to size, and the other one's detailing it all and telling all these different things. But he's literally using that as the source when he wrote it. So that's why he's telling you. You know, it's not even contested. I mean, I can't even get him to listen to me, and it wasn't even contested for like 200 years, 150 years. Do you see what I mean? That's crazy to me, right? Anyway, so we had fun this morning. Let's pray. You're on the edge of scholarly debate. You just don't know it. All right, let's pray. Father, thank you for some time with this. I know that it's exhausting. I thank you for your help to find it. Lord, I was about to give up middle of the night. I was like, golly, I'm over. I got one bozo saying the wrong thing, and I can't find it. This guy's supposed to be helping me, and it seems like for once he's slopped up. Well, Lord, you help me find all the sources by the second part of the morning, and I thank you for that. And thank you for the witness that this is to us, Lord, that our church was founded, and Wesley. I mean, they're directly attaching Wesley to the later millennial movements, the Darby stuff, everything. It's all tied in. It's not me coming up with this. This man had influenced me before I really understood. I hadn't read his book, except when I first was studying this. And so, Lord, I'm thankful for what you're doing, and I pray that you help us with these things in Jesus' name.